Glad you're all here. And I was going to say one of the housekeeping items is we are recording this, so we can put it on our new YouTube channel and you guys can access it. For those of you who don't know me, and I think most people do by now, I was the ex-CHRO of Enron and the founder of the Executive Strategic Alliance. And for the past 5-6 years, we at ESA have partnered with ADP to bring thought leadership to executives. And now we have in our community about 1,200 participants in 20 cities, delivering world-class, not just world-class thought leadership, but also starting to really deliver briefings around technologies that can operationalize those visions, and also roundtable discussions where we can talk about, innovative kind of things that are top of mind with both the CHROs and the CIOs. If you guys would put your questions in chat, we'd appreciate that. And at the end of I'll monitor that and make sure that and probably David will too, we'll monitor it and make sure that we've captured all the questions before we wrap up. And then there will be time to go ahead and answer and ask questions and answer questions at the end. I want to talk a little bit more about ESA before I turn it over to our thought leaders and guests. We are unique in that we bring CHROs and CIOs together, and there's not many networks that do that, because we believe that both the CHRO and the CIO and other work tech executives really have to be in lockstep to deliver that amazing employee experience and worker experience that you've got to have today. In addition to thought leadership, we have a couple additional products that we've launched. One, we offer an opportunity to be a work tech startup advisor, where executives are exposed to next generation technologies, kind of first look at these technologies, and also look at potential startup advisory board positions. And then last month, I'm proud to say that we launched a board positioning membership where we've brought together what we think are all the things that an executive needs to consider to really figure out what kind of board, be it public, private, or nonprofit, that they need they'd love to be on. And take a look at our new website, you guys. We launched that website the first part of this week, and we're pretty proud of that as well. So today I'm honored to have two incredible thought leaders and a very, very special guest sharing insights about the current talent market and sharing a next generation compensation analytics product that is being used in attracting and retaining talent. Schon is a product leader specializing in business intelligence, and he's the owner of the ADP's Real Income Data Subscription product. And I'm excited about the insights that he'll share about the overall talent market and the new offering available to all organizations, regardless of the HCM they use. As many of you currently do, I use survey data in the past. And as you will hear, in addition to the state of the current talent market, this product can add a real-time component to the compensation analysis. We also have Dave Tereski, who was at ADP and was the chief product owner for the ADP Data Cloud when I first met him several years ago. He left ADP, where he founded his own consulting company focused on helping organizations and people analytics and compensation management. And recently, David sold his consulting practice to salary.com and launched the HR Data Labs podcast, which is now one of the most popular in its category. And finally, we also have a rock star executive, Heather Benjamin Brown, who leads both HR and IT and facilities and supply chain for Calpine Corporation in Houston. Heather's unique in that she has all of those functions reporting to her. And prior to her role at Calpine, she was at MD Anderson Cancer Center, leading supply chain. And prior to MD Anderson, she served as a strategic sourcing executive for waste management. So I'm really excited to have all three of you guys here today. Welcome, everyone. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Schon.
Well, thanks so much, Cindy. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, Heather, my favorite executive, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you so much. Great to see everyone, and Happy New Year.
Great to see you too. And David, the absolute coolest podcaster on the planet with the coolest tools. How are you, sir? Oh, you're on mute.
I promise I was not on mute before. Thanks, Sean. I'm good. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much. Just when I was going to set you up about your coolness, you found yourself on mute.
Who hasn't been on mute in 2021 or 2022 when the chips were down?
That's great. I think that's a great t-shirt to have. We should look into that. Well, welcome everybody. Really appreciate the time today. We were having a lot of fun before the call got started. And let's continue to have a little bit of fun too, although I know we're looking at stats on a page, so how fun can this actually be? We are going to have a really good, interactive, lively conversation. We've got the right people to have such a conversation like that today. I thought maybe just to get us started, what we would do is share a bit of employment data. ADP recently published fourth quarter employment stats. And so perhaps to set the table or to create a little context to lead into our conversation, wanted to just share with you some of the key stats that are driving the workforce in the United States today. By the way, all of these are available to anyone on the call, and there's much more data related to this available. If you go to the ADP Research Institute and look for something called the Workforce Vitality Report, you'll find these statistics, you'll find the methodologies for how we pull these statistics together, and you'll also find a great deal more information such as how these fare by industry, specific jobs, business sizes, and a whole different other views into the data behind the summary data that we're going to share with you now. So I think first of all, remember that we're looking at national averages. This is all industries, all jobs, all business sizes. As of December 31st, this past December, we saw year-over-year wage growth of 4.4%. We saw an increase in the wage level as well, and that's an hourly figure you see there at $31.53 per hour. We saw employment growth across all industries at 5%, which is a huge jump over last December. But then again, when you think what was going on in December 2020, probably not as surprising. What may be surprising to you, as it was surprising to us, and we were talking about this before the call, is the turnover rate at 5%. So again, this is aggregated across all business sizes and all industries. I think if you were to look into specific industries like hospitality and retail and maybe even healthcare and probably any industries where you have a public-facing associates, you probably would see a much higher turnover rate. And then perhaps pulling it the other way, you have what's known as now the laptop class, which is probably pulling the turnover rate in the other direction. So those two forces counteracting each other have us at a 5.1% turnover rate across all industries. So when you think about the 4.4 wage increase, you look at the top of the slide here, let's see like how the different types of job holders are doing. Current job holders are seeing 5.9% increase in their pay. Job switchers are seeing the largest bump at 8%. And then entrants are seeing the lowest amount of wage increase at 3%. So it looks like it pays to jump from one job to another. That's certainly not my advice, but just sharing with you what the data shows there. And just below that, I think it's also interesting to kind of compare the visualizations of employment, which you can see bottomed out in December 2020. And then the stack on top of that, the wage growth, which, it looks somewhat flat on this chart because, just because we're taking a very high level view. But as I mentioned before, we've seen a 4.4% wage growth from this past December to the December for it. So slight increase over the last many quarters of December with that horrible valley in December 2020, which I think we all know what that was related to. That was really during the height of the pandemic, which I think we'd all love to believe, and we were talking about before this call, we're going to find ourselves out of that situation, hopefully very soon. Hopefully very soon. All right, this is a little bit busy, but I just thought, I know we've got a lot of folks on the call that are from different regions in the United States. This is the same data I just shared with you. You can look on the left-hand side. You can see we're showing you wage growth. And of that wage growth, how much of that is related to entrants, switchers and holders. You see that on the left, overall employment growth, and then turnover also on the left. Then you just look at the different columns and it shows you how each one of those metrics is bearing itself out in the various regions in the United States. So for example, if you look at the West in the top left quadrant there, actually saw a slight wage growth decrease from December 20 to December 21, whereas in the South, you saw a slight or more than a slight, a pretty significant increase from December 20 to December 21. So it's kind of interesting to look at the different regions in the United States and compare these employment trends. Again, just wanted to encourage you one more time. You can dive deeper into this data. ADP Research Institute, just Google it, or whatever your favorite search function is. Go to the Workforce Vitality Report, and you can drill much more deeply into any of this data. All right, I am going to stop sharing, and now comes the interactive conversation part. This is the reason why you all came today. Certainly not to hear me drone on about various employment metrics. So Heather, let's open up with you. I mean, we've talked at length about this before. You've seen some of the data that we've shared now. I just would be curious, from your position in your chair, what are some of your observations about the overall employment climate today?
Well, first and foremost, it's interesting to see this national data, but when I think about it in terms of my industry, we actually are probably seeing a lot more turnover than maybe what you see on average. And I would say, our issues are really predominantly driven by our aging workforce. And so we're seeing a lot of retirements. And so, I was a little bit surprised by that average number as I think about my industry. But, again, this is an average across the entire ADP, customer base. Maybe just for a moment, as I think about turnover and just what's going on in the labor market, not only are we seeing retirements, but, we also are seeing regional wage pressure in some of our sub-regions, so to speak. And then that tight labor market for, in particular, our craft roles and technical roles. And then last, and I know we mentioned as we were getting ready for this call earlier, this trend in alternative flexible work schedules. So, all of those things combined are really putting pressure, between retirements, wage pressure, tight labor market, and then this whole idea of an alternative work schedule, flexible work environment. It's really giving pause to, people like me in my seat to really evaluate our competitiveness in the market to be able to attract talent. And so, as I look at ADP's data, it definitely influences how we think about this. And I know, we'll talk more about exactly, a little further in the conversation about it, the tool set that the analytics that you guys are providing today and how we use those. But I would say, we're seeing some pressure on our turnover, and it's a combination of those issues I mentioned.
Yeah, David, I'd love reflections on some of those things that Heather mentioned as well. I know you have a very unique perspective on these, given your affiliation and your focus.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Heather. And especially now, people are reevaluating their lives. They're seeing what happened during the pandemic. They're looking at the prospect of potentially returning to a workplace. And there's still a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of unknowns about their childcare situations. There's a lot of unknowns about whether or not they're going to have to return to work full-time in the office. And a lot of surveys that we've seen, in fact, salary.com does surveys. And one of the things that has been, there's a big gap opening up between employer perceptions of how they want people to return to work and the perception that employees have about wanting to return to work. And that gap is growing. We've seen that organizations are saying basically that they want to reduce the reliance on working from home by about 20% from last year to this year. So I think the number is around 45 or 46% of employers are still wanting to offer a remote-based workforce, the ability to stay home, at least full-time. And what the perception from workers is pretty much around 60 to 70% of them want to stay working from home. So there's that gigantic gap between the perception that organizations have about wanting people to return and people wanting to go back. And you could call this a lifestyle issue. And Heather, I'm sure a lot of people that you've talked to, it's either a lifestyle issue or they've seen how fun or performant they can be from home.
Right.
And they say, well, this solves a lot of problems about childcare. It solves a lot of problems about my child getting sick. It solves a lot of things for my life.
Right.
Do I want to drive back to work and have that stress? Do I want to pay for commuting? Do I want to put on a suit anymore?
Right.
Sorry for the guy who's wearing a suit on the call, but seriously, what does it change in terms of the lifestyle that we've been accustomed to over the last 2 years? And how does it change my perception about the value of my work and whether or not I actually want to go back?
Yeah, it's definitely a big debate in our organization right now on this whole notion of alternative work. And that's probably a whole segment that you could host, Cindy, just on that one topic alone. And how we solve that gap, as David refers to, because it is definitely a gap between perception and reality. We're definitely struggling with it.
David, you mentioned we've had so many folks working from home, and the question is, do they actually want to return? I'm actually working on a project with my employer where we have a host of employees that are all working from home now, and they now have the opportunity to come back and work in this beautiful new refurbished office that we put together. And one of the things I've been doing is I've been put in charge of contacting them and asking them what their sentiment is for returning. 48% of them have said, I'm good. I'll stay right here. Thanks for asking.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think, Schon, that's going to be a little low. I think most other people are going to say, I'm good. I like this.
Yeah, you're probably right.
And the other thing that you have to take into consideration is companies who go and start talking to employees again about this relationship, and they start saying, well, if you want to work from home, what concession are you willing to make?
Right.
You need to be very careful.
Right.
Very careful. And I don't know if you've been following this, but on LinkedIn, people have asked that question. What would you be willing to give up? Would you give up pay? Would you give up on other things? Potentially, would you want to work from home all 5 days? Or would you want to go 4? And the conversation has to be balanced. It's not, there's no power here. The organization doesn't hold power and say, you must come back. Because as we've been talking about, if you're heavy-handed on this situation, that factor of right now, unemployment is at 3.9%. It's hard to find people, good people, and people are willing to go just by saying, I'm ready to go. The great, whatever you want to call it. It's real. Heather, I don't know about your thoughts on those things, and I don't know whether that's actually been considered.
Well, again, getting back to the whole point here is about being competitive. And we are having to consider flexible work arrangements as we evaluate, attracting talent and keeping and also retaining talent. Probably more so retaining, but more and more, as an operating company, that the challenge for us is, as an operating company, we have 3/4 of our workforce who don't have an option to work from home.
Right.
And so that is always in the background of, as we think about, considering a flexible work schedule for our non-operating employees. And, so where we ultimately go here, I think we will take baby steps. We do have a part of our workforce already who has to, travel all around the country for their jobs. So where they live in some cases doesn't matter. Right. So there's, when we start to winnow the population that we really have to evaluate a flexible work schedule for, it actually becomes a very small population. So, we are actively having this great debate. And haven't come to any real conclusion other than to say, we'll talk about it, we'll think about it. prior to the pandemic, it was a closed door, hand up. We're not having this conversation.
Right.
So we are definitely actively now having this conversation, which is refreshing, because I know it's critical to our competitiveness in the marketplace to both retain and attract new talent.
And what I find fascinating, sorry, Schon, what I find fascinating is that money does not solve this issue.
No, it doesn't. No.
A lot of organizations are looking at things like sign-on bonuses. They're looking at increased pay, which causes other competitive pressures, like it causes compression for the employees who are currently there, especially more senior employees.
Yeah.
Right.
And so throwing money at this is not going to help. It actually may exacerbate and make worse a lot of situations that had been building over time.
No, I agree with you 100%. And in fact, that's also been part of our conversation, is how we, compete for talent without having to raise everybody who exists in the organization today, the incumbents, and having, as you say, that compression between a new hire and an incumbent. And we're getting creative, which, maybe a segue to, the tool and having visibility real time around compensation in the marketplace. It's critical, because in my role, I make compensation decisions every single day.
Right.
It is not quarterly, it's not monthly, it's daily that I'm making compensation decisions.
Right.
In fact, as I was getting on this call, as our host and hostess know, my CEO came to my door, and it was a compensation real time, need some information in 2 hours, and so I'm becoming ever reliant on, third party tools. I've got my own data internally, and I can benchmark what we pay for a role, but ever more, it's what is the market telling us? And so having real time data, which I think is unique to the ADP solution, as opposed to having aged data, which we do rely on as well, has become integral to our making compensation decisions today. And again, we use it daily. So I think, I don't think, in fact, I heard this in a conversation a couple of days ago, and you probably saw the headline Home Depot, just about Home Depot. They're making job offers within 24 hours now.
Yeah.
You can't wait anymore.
Right.
The time to market and the time to get that talent is so compressed today than it ever was. We do not have the luxury of weeks to make decisions about a candidate. We have to make decisions real time.
Yeah.
And within 24, 48 hours, the market is that tight. And so, I thought it was a really great headline today, and really reinforces for my executive team. We have to make decisions on talent that come to us, whether or not we want them or move on, because they're not going to be there tomorrow. It's kind of like the real estate market, right?
Yeah, right.
It's akin to the real estate market. There's 5 other people lining up at the door for that same talent, and you've got to make a decision. So, ever more, again, relying on real-time data to help inform our decision-making around, compensation.
And if I may, it's also fascinating that the employees or the candidates are also improving their ability to understand what are the offers or what should be offered.
Absolutely.
I don't know if anybody on the call has seen this, but in my local market, we have Amazon, we have Stop and Shop, we have a bunch of companies that are actually coming out, spending media time and buying advertisements, not talking about produce, talking about working at those companies. And they're actually displaying on the screen, here's what your benefit packages are. Here's how cool it is to work here. And not only that, but they're also showing, here are our starting rates. And then what do you get with those starting rates, including tuition, not tuition assistance. Let's be clear. They're actually paying for people to go to college as part of their compensation package that they're actually throwing up on the screen. And so when you're dealing with those pressures, Heather's right. You cannot be at all ambivalent about this.
No.
Absolutely have to have your packages published so that your hiring managers and your recruiters have it in front of them to make real-time decisions.
Right.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I haven't gone to put gas in my car and not seen advertisements for the gas station right there at the pump. Or we've got this amazing store called Buc-ee's here in Georgia, which is, you know, they've got this sign. I think it's in Texas too, but yeah, I mean, $18 starting pay, you know, it's every single place I turn around is, you know, this lure of high wage, but as I reflect on it, a lot of that are roles that deal directly with the public. And I'm wondering, and we weren't planning on going here, but I was curious because of something you previously said. I'm wondering if those roles that interact directly with the public in healthcare, in hospitality, in retail, Heather, I know you've got people at your organization that deal directly with the public. Do we think that those are the types of employees where maybe that lure of money, maybe they are folding their arms and saying, you know what, I think I may stay on the sidelines a little bit longer and wait for the general public to stop being so cranky before I accept that ridiculous wage? I don't know. I'm raising the question. I mean, Heather, what do you see?
Well, I mean, what I see is it's that public facing segment of our employee group that we're having to contemplate alternative, you know, work schedules or work weeks because of the lure, as you're suggesting, you know, by other organizations. You know, it's a combination, you know, of being financially, you know, compensation competitive, but also, you know, what's my work life look like? And that's in the nexus more and more today than it ever was. And so, yeah, I think we're having to be creative as HR leaders, more so than we've ever had to be today to attract and retain talent. And again, I put the emphasis on retaining talent. You know, with the low, you know, I know 5%, 5.1% turnover may be high to some. That's actually, to me, seems pretty normal because then there's some turnover you want, you know, so I think it's probably about 50-50. And so I think that for us, the emphasis is on retaining, you know, the talent we do have, because we in our case, we feel like we have a highly skilled workforce that we put a lot of value on, that we want to keep. But yeah, evermore we're finding we're having to evaluate and be creative to be able to do that.
I think one of the other fascinating things, and Heather, I don't know if you've seen this as well, is that and I think we talked about this in our earlier webinar, is talking about the potential for increasing our merit budgets for 2022, because
Sure.
we had gone in, and in fact, I think some of the early surveys that had been done in mid 2021 said, oh, it's probably going to be about 3%.
Sure.
And a lot of organizations have revisited that. In fact, we did a new one and it's going to be over 3% now. And that's coming specifically from the CPI going through the roof, especially and I'm going to list them out because this is coming directly from the Department of Labor website, the BLS actually. Gasoline is number one at 50% year-over-year increase in prices, 50%. Used cars and trucks is at right now 37.3%. Energy, 29.3%. And number 5 on this list is everything we love, meat, poultry, fish, and eggs at 12.5% increase in prices from December 2020 to 2021. Now, we all know that those are things we can't live without. I mean, I can't live without my eggs in the morning, right? And so if people are getting at least 12% increase on prices of these things that they have to have, like gasoline is up 50%, then giving them an increase of 3% isn't going to cut it. And they're going to start listening to these other offers that are giving them way more, not just on base salary, but way more on base plus those other benefits. And then you need to start thinking about a total rewards philosophy of how am I compensating them and how am I keeping them whole?
So David, actually, you know, it's that is the point. And we, in my organization, we don't just look at, you know, the base salary. We have a total rewards philosophy.
Right.
And so just for a moment on the, annual merit increase, we've stayed, and I'm proud to say, on our increases have beat inflation over the course of my 14 years here at Calpine. In fact, I just plotted that data for my executive team a week ago.
Yeah.
So we beat inflation. But for 2021 was a different year, and times are different. So, we're adjusting our philosophy on that base merit increase. And so we've inched up a little bit. Are we going to beat it? No, we're not going to beat it. But from a total rewards perspective, what we have done in our case, and I'm proud to say, we've held our healthcare benefits flat for now going into our 4th year. And so when you look at total rewards, we are beating inflation. And so we take that whole philosophy all together, or excuse me, we take the whole package together in terms of our philosophy and how we address being competitive in the marketplace, not solely on base salary.
And Heather, just a quick question on that. Do you have managers and employees fully understand those things, and you communicate the total rewards mentality and the total rewards package? And that, okay, good.
It is an active part of our dialogue with our employees. We've been educating our employees around total rewards and actually providing total rewards statements for at least since I've been running HR for the last 10 years. And people look at that and people refer to it. For years, we mailed them to people's homes. Because we wanted their spouses to see in the mail, hey, here's what I get paid. It's not just what I bring home.
Right.
We've now moved to a self-service model, but the point is we've been presenting that and providing that to employees for years now, and it's becoming a very valuable tool.
And it will give people pause to say, how does my new offer compare to what I'm getting today? I know the people. The grass may seem greener, but here's my situation today. I love where I work. I love the people I work with. I love the people I work for. And here's how they invest in me. Mm-hmm. And then be able to give them that document, or they have that document and they know where to get it, of here's the total investment that Calpine has in my life.
Right. That's
important, because I think a lot of organizations, especially for hourly employees, they kind of think of, well, it's an hourly transactional basis. It isn't. This is a life decision that they're making, and it's hard to make those choices. I mean, we all know this. It's hard to make those choices day to day. And I think you were saying before that, and I know Cindy mentioned this before, that we want to make sure that people are making the right decision for their lives as they're making these decisions. And it's become too easy, too transactional today. Keeping that total reward statement in the back of their mind does give them that pause, which is very important.
Yeah, agreed.
Hey, Sean. Sean, there's one question in chat, and I want to make sure we get to it, at least at some point. Rick Byers asking, what does the data reveal about productivity at home if you're working from home versus the office? Do you guys have any data on that? I'm just curious.
So I think there have been studies that have been done, and they're not anecdotal, that have shown that productivity actually increases from the home-based environment. And Schon, I think what we could try and do is find them. I know that they exist. I've seen them. I've read them. But people feel more productive at home. They're especially getting back the commuting hours to actually be able to focus on work. So there you go. There's some right there. But there are studies that actually show that people feel more productive at home. I know there was some initial concern about, letting people work from home. Yeah. But we had to give that up. And the fact is that the jobs have actually gotten done. Work has gotten done. And so I think we need to be very careful about worrying about the productivity. Although I think the studies have proven that people feel more empowered and they feel more productive.
Yeah.
So I would offer, or Schon, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please, Heather.
Well, here's what I would offer is I think it's situational. I don't think it's a one size fits all. And what I mean by that is, those roles that are truly predominantly transactional roles, there's probably a rationale for those to be a full-time work from home. But those jobs that require collaboration, highly strategic, thought, decision-making, those are roles that I believe there's got to be some interaction. It's not 100% work from home. So I really do believe it's role specific and situational, and obviously unique to each organization. But I'm not so sure. I'm of the camp that, yes, everybody 100% go work from home. My example is my CEO just walking to my door just a minute ago, and you lose that interaction,
Yeah.
or you don't have the same level of interaction with somebody walking to your door asking you for something as you do, trying to find you and make sure you're available to get you on the phone to be able to have that conversation. I just think there's something that goes missing, altogether, without some kind of in-person interaction. So I'm mixed on that. I really do believe it's situational.
I think that's why so many organizations are doing the hybrid approach.
Yeah.
I need that interaction, that face-to-face interaction personally. My wife doesn't want it. She'd stay at home the whole time if she could have it. So I think you're absolutely right. It just depends on what serves that individual worker the best, and probably some mix, and giving employees options where you can is probably the best path forward on that.
Hey, Schon,
Heather, yeah.
One more question around that from Tony Walsh. She says, do you all feel there is concern on behalf of our teams regarding their career development if they are 100% remote?
And I would answer it the same way, with the same response I just gave a moment ago. I think it's situational, right? I think a transactional role where, in this case, a call center, have to know a script, and they're training, it's technology driven, versus somebody who's making strategic analytical decisions and working with the executive team, for example. I think those are different. And so I think, I think it's role specific, in terms of developing an individual. I think there are things that you can absolutely get from being remote and developing, and online learning and collaboration online, but there's just something to me that is very different than, say, shadowing. So for example, we have a program where we have selected a few folks to shadow individuals. They wouldn't get the same experience if they weren't able to do that in person versus do that, if they were fully remote.
And I think, Heather, what we're going to start to see is a mix.
Yeah.
We'll start to see hybrid working, where there'll be a day a week where people go to the office, not because they have to, but because they want to. And they'll be able to do that water cooler talk, or to have those mentoring situations.
Right.
Or to lunch with the people that they like to work with.
Right.
Because we've all missed it. And it comes down to us being able to find a happy medium, an equilibrium. It's not going to be all remote, and it's certainly not going to be all in person anymore. There's going to be a happy medium. People, especially younger people, crave those interactions.
Yes. And
they want to learn. They want to be able to have those, go to the office, see the person, learn from them. Yes. And I think over time, we're going to get back there. I think that until COVID or Omicron, whatever you want to call it, whatever the latest strain is of COVID, until it gets to a place where people feel like they can be safe leaving their house, leaving their kids, going to work again, and they can afford it, they will, and they'll want to. Mm-hmm. But it can't be an edict, I guess is my point. It'll have to be some kind of happy medium between the two.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah, great point. Heather, when I first met you, you told me we make data-driven decisions around here.
Yes.
And I love that. I'm still a little bit stuck on your reference to workers kind of remind you of the real estate market today. And it got me wondering if I have a Zillow score as an employee. It got me wondering if potential new hires have some kind of Zillow score, and they do. It's a fair market wage for what my work is worth and what I'm worth.
Absolutely.
So I was curious. Talk to me a little bit about sources of data, sources of information, sources of intelligence that you've traditionally used to really understand what current market value looks like for employees, and maybe what you've found recently, and just talk a little bit about some of the pros and cons for each. And David, I know this is your sweet spot too, so I'd love you to come over the top and add what you could.
Well, so, you know, as you suggest, Sean, in my company, we make decisions so predominantly based on data. In fact, very few decisions do we make anecdotally. In fact, people are admonished in our company if you don't have data to back up an opinion. And so data is important in every decision, and in particular compensation decisions. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, historically, we've used salary.com, we've used Towers, we've used Hewitt's information, but, you know, respectfully, that data, not necessarily salary.com, but traditionally the data sets that we've used are traditionally aged. They're basically, you know, a year old. You know, as an organization, I'm sure, like many of my colleagues on the line here, we all participate in surveys, and that data is usually, you know, when you go to pull it, it's a look back. What did people do a year ago? And so for us, we relied on that data, and we still do. But complementary to that data is real-time data, such as the ADP real-time data. We relied on that. And then, you know, we do rely on some industry benchmarks as well within our own sector for compensation for specific industry-specific roles. You know, so for us, you know, that is how we make our compensation decisions, is using, you know, a hybrid of real-time data, industry data, as well as the, you know, traditional survey data. And I will tell you what's really fascinating, and I may have mentioned this to you all before, you know, used to be it was the hiring manager. And when I say the hiring manager, it wasn't typically our senior leaders really interested in the data. They relied on their managers, but more and more our senior leaders, our executives, want to see that data as part of their global decision making for their organization. And so more and more we are benchmarking positions in our organization, their base compensation and total package. And our executives are actually pulling on us. We're not having to push that on them. It's really become a pull mentality in helping inform their decision making more and more. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's really, I would say for us, it's a hybrid approach.
And Heather, let me comment on that. When we consult with clients, and I consult with a lot of ADP clients, one of the first things we do is we look at the ADP Data Cloud data, and we triangulate the ADP data, which is real time. It's basically as recent as last month, and the last month's payroll actually, which is extremely accurate. And we pair that up with the benchmarks that we get from other surveys, and so there's a really natural complementary nature of the ADP data and the published survey data, which is aged, as you said. But what they do is they help reinforce that this is now two data points that can, you know, give that manager or the executives that comfort level that they're not just basing their pay practices on one thing, that they're actually using what's available in the market, the tried and true, plus what's new, putting it together to have comfort that they're actually coming together and making better decisions. So I'm going to reinforce what you say 100%. Our clients love the fact that they can get access to that real-time data from ADP, plus get the survey sources as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey,
Sean?
David, I saw a question come through, Cindy. I think I was going to hit it the same one that you were going to, and I was going to direct it to David because he and I had talked about this before. I saw something come through on pay transparency, and I remember a conversation you and I had about it, and you said something like, if you think that one employee doesn't know what another employee makes, you're sadly mistaken.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Talk to me a little
world
bit.
of the internet. I mean, go on, no offense, but you can go on salary.com and find out what the competitive wage is. You can go to Glassdoor. You can go to other places and find out how much people are making inside your organization. And, when I was the manager of compensation for Morgan Stanley, basically 2 decades ago, we actually had a rule that you couldn't talk about pay. But I mean, that was at the same point where we wore suits to work every day until we came up with Casual Friday, right? And so we're now at a situation where, there are laws saying you must publish pay and you must have it on your job requisitions as you're going to hire people. And we have to get out of this mindset that pay has to be secret. It's not a secret anymore. The world of the internet has opened up information to everybody. We've democratized data in the consumer space. So you can't think that people won't talk. Yes, we don't have the water cooler anymore. We have it worse. We have the internet. And so people know. And one of the things that we actually just did a pay equity study, and a couple of the questions focused on pay transparency. And one of the questions was, if you're looking for a new job, do they post ranges? 34% said yes, only 34%. But it says, the next question is, if you're searching for a new job, do prospective employees share their pay range during the interview process? Then, those same people who are now looking for jobs said 54% said yes. So when I'm looking, I know, or I'm more often than not now, I know what the ranges are, even though I don't know the ranges in my company. I don't know how that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And so we need to kind of open up a little bit, and we need to tell people, what careers do they have with us? What training are we going to give them? And, forget about pay for a second. Where's your career going here? Heather mentioned the total reward statement. That's a really great step forward. But let's talk about the other half of it. What's my future here? Where am I going? What's my opportunity? And then publish what ranges there are for those opportunities, so people know, if I do well and I get to this level of proficiency, I can get this role, which pays me more, instead of looking over there, right?
Right.
So you've got to open up, and hopefully you've seen some of that. Heather, have you seen more of that?
So it's interesting. On a walk with my husband last night, we were talking about pay transparency in his company, and they're about to publish salary ranges for his architecture firm.
That's awesome.
And it's actually, they've been debating this for about 12, 15 months, how they're actually going to do it. So I'm actively talking to my husband about this. We actually published our pay ranges years ago. Our managers all know pay ranges. I would say that the challenge there is, for us at least, I'm sure many of my colleagues, pay ranges are big.
Yep.
And there's a lot of jobs in that pay range. And so educating employees on is a tricky thing.
Right.
It is not a one size, message fits all. You've got to tailor pay transparency to each of your 4 segments. And so we're doing that slowly, but it's not 100. We're not 100% there. We still have some work to do on that front. But our managers all know pay ranges, and like I said years ago, we published pay ranges for our employees, and we're segment by segment. We're doing that.
And Heather, what's amazing about what you just said which is brilliant, is the managers need to be the people. Yes. They need to be the arbiters. They need to be the conveyance tool that you use to educate your employees, because they're the ones who have that relationship.
That's right.
How many times have we heard managers say, I don't know, HR told me to do this, or told me to say this? And I think the other interesting thing about what you said, which is I find fascinating, is that we are dealing with mature adults here, or we should be, right? And so the managers have to be mature adults. The employees have to be mature adults, because this is a business conversation.
Right.
It's not, how's your family doing? What's going on with the Mets? What's happening in the NFL? This is, I'm dealing with the things that matter to you. This is your career. This is your pay. So let's talk about how pay works. Let's talk about how pay works for you, not for me. We're not talking about the boss. We're talking about the person. And then have a mature conversation about that. And, all too often we get into emotional conversations with employees about this stuff. We hate having these conversations, but a mature employee who's educated on how compensation works and is comfortable with that will feel much more comfortable about how they reach pay, what they're
Right.
doing, and where they're going with it, and
Right.
where's their future.
Well, and I would add to that, David, is this distinction between cost of labor and cost of living.
Yes.
And that has been a huge topic of conversation. And one of the things we've worked very hard to educate our employees about is that difference and what our merit increase is meant to do, and how we look at wages. It is not necessarily the cost of living, because if it was based on cost of living, folks in California would be making exponentially more than somebody in Texas and, Alabama.
Yep.
And so, we've really had to and have spent a lot of time educating on cost of living versus cost of labor.
Right.
And those are two different things in the markets. And I would say we got our employees there to understand that. And that was a huge win for us a few years ago in educating our employees. And so we really got off the dime of, hey, I can't buy a house over here. Well, we explained to them, look, the wages and our role is to be competitive for labor. Where you choose to live is not necessarily our decision, but we are mindful of that, but it is not the first order of business for us necessarily. Right. So that's something we've spent a lot of time on educating our employees about.
And by the way, that's not a one-time thing. That's
it is not.
Drumbeat.
It is. Yeah.
And every time, not only is every time compensation is communicated between the manager and employee, but that has to happen all the time, because when we're seeing pressures like this increase in gas prices by 50%, people start feeling the pinch at the pump or in their pocket, and they say, how's my company going to help me fix this? We're not supposed to fix it. We're supposed to help you get paid a fair wage.
That's exactly right.
A fair wage.
That's right. And just to bring it all back, again, it is not just on the base wage. We as a company are committed to a total rewards philosophy where you can live a good life wherever you live, because Calpine has a total rewards philosophy. Right. And so we're mindful of our health benefits plan and all the other attributes that inure to employees that make up that total package.
Totally agree.
Cindy, one of the things that we had planned on doing was showing a bit of the ADP tool. It's been referenced a couple times already. However, I love the way the conversation's going, and I was wondering if there were any additional chat questions that might be beneficial that we'd like to cover.
There's one that just came in. How do you educate and communicate the difference to your employees? I think that just came in based on the last round of conversation. So Schon, I was just giving you a heads up. We got 5 minutes. So you use that time however you want to. Okay.
Yeah, I think Heather covered that in what she just said, right? It's about making sure that not only are they paid a fair wage, but they're also being paid a total rewards package that should keep them healthy and financially healthy, while not trying to solve all their problems. It's what the company can afford based on the job they do. I think that's what you said.
That's exactly right.
And Schon, there is one more question which really plays into
Let's do it.
What you saw from Rick Beyer, how do you determine, the pay equity? So I think showing this and maybe having Heather comment on how she uses the survey data and this tool might answer that question.
Yeah, Heather, you want to take a crack at that?
So what kinds of analytic measurements are you using to measure and maintain pay equity? Well, here's what I will tell you is we look at compensation every single year. It's not a once in a blue moon endeavor. We do it in earnest once a year. And then generally, in pockets where we are seeing competition or pressure on wages, we'll take a very strategic, focused look. So in terms of analytics, it's really looking at real-time pay data, and we're utilizing the ADP real-time data. as well as the historical, traditional market data, to help us understand, where we have opportunities to make adjustments. So, I think some companies, and I have a couple of colleagues who only look at compensation, when someone's leaving. And I would say you've got to do it all. You've got to have a routine, programmatic mechanism to look at pay so that you are sure not to have inequities, so to speak. So I hope that answers the question. It's really, I think it's the frequency in which you look at the data, and then leveraging the tools like ADP and the traditional surveys, that, really will help you evaluate whether or not you're competitive or not, and paying equitably.
Yeah, if I might add one more thing, create cohorts. Make sure you have comparable work understood, what jobs equate with other jobs, and then do the analyses to see if it's a female-dominated job versus male, and then if it's ethnicity-based or minority versus majority based jobs. Do the work. Put in the work to look at what are those groups getting paid against each other, and see what the gaps are, or the potential gaps, and see if you can explain them away with the experience and other variables that can be explained. And if you can't, set up a plan to act on them. But don't be passive about it. Be aggressive, and make a plan.
Yeah, thanks, David. Cindy, you'll be impressed with this, the world's fastest show of the solution we've referred to a couple times. And David helped architect this too. So look, we're going to provide some follow-up information. I'll send some information out on the heels of this call about how you can find out more information about accessing ADP's data set of current wage data. I pulled up an administrative assistant just to give you an example. You can see here across the country that the base salary for administrative assistant is $41K. It's increased 4% over the last year. What's really interesting, though, is you start to look at the different regions. So if I was to look at this role in Illinois, 41.6 is the base pay for that. Well, what about over here in Missouri? Well, it's $35K, and that's 14% less than the national average. So you can see how much regions in the country play into overall compensation, and how important and yet how difficult it can be, especially when you're operating in multiple states, to set wages, and why it would be critical to understand what a particular role like an administrative assistant is making in a Missouri versus a Texas versus a Georgia. And furthermore, understanding real time based on actual payrolls, what the spread of pay is. What is the lowest percentile? Are they at 29K? They are. Or the higher end of the pay range for a job like that is at 66K. And how much does overtime play into that? You can see that 46% of administrative assistants earned overtime, and it made up 1% of their salary. And is there bonus at play? You know there is, because we talked about bonuses and how important those are now from a retention and attraction talent standpoint. So this is just a quick taste, being able to have an interactive visualizations of actual pay data based on real payroll information, harmonizing that with other sources like salary.com and other, Department of Labor or what have you. Collecting as much information as possible is what anybody that's really doing compensation strategy is looking for. And so we're happy to add to some of that data set. But Cindy, like I said, world's fastest show of the tool. I think we're at time.
I highly endorse it. It's a great tool. If the HR leaders on the phone haven't had an opportunity to look at it, I just encourage you to at least try it. It's been invaluable for me, and I'm not paid to say that, by the way. I personally believe that data is incredibly invaluable when making compensation decisions, and the real-time data is essential.
Agreed.
Thank you. Cindy, take us home. She's on mute. David, you weren't the only one to be on mute. It's true.
Hey, listen,
happens.
2022 is still just 2021, just revised, right?
That's right.
We're still there. People go on mute and don't know.
So just to wrap it up, guys, thank you so much. It was so great to have Schon and David and Heather. And I
Thank
just
you.
want to mention one more thing before I wrap it up. I got pretty aggressive on scheduling events. We've got one tomorrow with Workplace by Meta, which is Facebook, that if you haven't registered for it, it's really a great session around how to build a connected culture with technology. And then in March, Christian Gomez is going to be back. He is TMBC, and he's going to be talking about Marcus's new book. And actually, Marcus Buckingham is going to be a guest on that. So we look forward to seeing you guys on the next Thought Leadership Forum. Thanks so much, and we'll send out the information. Bye,
Thank you,
guys.
Cindy. Thank
Take
you,
care.
David.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everybody.